Hi everyone, and welcome back to a much demanded return of the Homebrew chapter conversion guide. You're joining me as I pluck an entirely new Space Marine chapter from the dark depths of my mind and show you what bits of plastic you need to smash together in order to create it. This time around we see the birth of the pocket-laden Void Scions, an example of which you can see before you now. So, who are these guys? Other than being that one person who always has those little scissors on them, they are an entirely primerist chapter designed with one purpose in mind: boarding. And I don't mean checking your passports before you get onto a battle cruiser. No, these guys are the guys you call when you want an enemy cruiser taking down fast, but you're all out of macro cannon ammunition. However, the Void Scions are unusual in their execution of their primary purpose. Instead of relying on boarding vessels, they instead brave the vacuum of space and deploy from smaller craft using their stabilizers and magnetized boots to allow them to navigate the hulls of enemy ships. If you've seen Wallace and Gromp's The Wrong Trousers, you'll know exactly what I mean. After swarming, often undetected, across their target's hull, they set up various entry points using high explosives, which are detonated in perfect synchronization. This cavalcade of breaches across the decks often leaves the defenders of the ships in disarray, unable to coordinate effective defenses and prompting the amber alert bulbs to be replaced with the red ones. Taking advantage of this chaos, well, not chaos, but you know what I mean, the Void Scions pour into the twisting corridors, unleashing withering fire from auto-bolt rifles fitted with high-capacity magazines. Their sacrifice of precision for volume of fire is a gamble that often pays out in favour of the Void Scions. The cramped and close-quarter fighting in sprawling hallways rarely allows for long-distance engagements. However, these confined spaces can be a double-edged sword, because when you're 9 feet tall and painted bright orange, even a stormtrooper with an inner ear condition could probably hit you when you're travelling down a narrow corridor. As such, the Void Scions sport additional ablative plating over their shoulders and other areas likely to receive returning fire. Rather than repairing this damage between engagements, these scars are often left in place, being worn as a badge of honour, showing their courage and determination under fire. Now, however rapid their deployments are, battling their way through the many decks of these huge ships quickly becomes an arduous slog. To ensure that their weight of fire can be maintained over many hours of fighting, the Void Scions keep themselves laden with extra ammunition, grenades and even replacement parts for the bolters, should the sustained fire cause damage. All of this extra equipment is stored in chest rigs designed to be much easier to reach when in a tight spot, figuratively and literally. Whilst other chapters may find that this added bulk gets in the way when aiming down their rifle sights, the Void Scions pay little attention to notions such as pinpoint accuracy and frugality. So, now that I've justified everything that I stuck to the Space Marine, even though the only reason I did it was because I thought it looked cool, let's see exactly what I used and how I used it. Number 1. Pouches. So if you're a woman who wonders where all the pockets that her clothes should have had went, then look no further, because they're probably stuck to a Void Scions chest. However, to get them to stick properly, we first need to shave down the chest iconography to create a smooth surface. I began this process with a blade and carefully shaved off the bulk of the symbol before smoothing it out with a file. Once I was left with this pristine surface, I could then go ahead and glue the chest plate to the rest of the torso and the legs. For the pouches, I wanted a mixture of larger and smaller pouches, but didn't want to do loads of cutting if I could help it. Thankfully, the Mark IV Space Marine kit features 8 pairs of large and small pouches that are perfect for our needs. About 3 of these larger pouches can fit comfortably across the chest. However, I needed to create a slight bend between the pair to help them wrap around the more curved surface. By using a knife or a saw, you can scour a line between the pouches on both the front and the back, and this will allow you to bend them slightly when you apply a little pressure. So once your pouches have submitted to your will, you can then go ahead and split the other pair in half with a saw or a knife, clean up the edge and then glue everything to the chest. These larger pouches will form the bottom row and should cover over the stomach and belt, stopping just above the thighs. This should leave enough room for them smaller pouches to be glued straight to the torso just above them without any other tweaks. Now, whilst I've only used Mark IV pouches here, feel free to add any other pouches or variations to what you see here based on what you have to hand. Number 2. Helmets. If you're going to be exposed to the vacuum of space, always make sure that you bring your helmet, unless you want to go all bug-eyed Bob like Arnold Schwarzenegger did in Total Recall. So there are going to be no helmetless heads here. Instead, I've opted for the Aggressor's head simply because it looks bulkier than regular Primus helmets, and the extra pipes and large rebreather looks more suited to operating in the Void. Alternatively, you could use Inceptor's heads or Terminator's heads. However, I feel that the latter of these are too iconic and possibly would look out of place on a regular Primus Marine. Number 3. Weaponry. The Aggressor's Kit once again provides us with the parts required to massively bulk up the ammo capacity of our Void Scions bolter. Simply take one of the ammo drums from the Aggressor's backpack and assemble it as normal. Then take the auto bolt rifle attachment from your Intercessor sprue and carefully remove the smaller inferior magazine in the way of your choosing before gluing it into place on your bolt rifle. Then use a knife or a file to make small adjustments to the magazine's intake on the bolt rifle to allow the larger magazine to fit. This does require a bit of fiddling and trimming to make sure that you do some dry fits to ensure everything joins properly before gluing them into place. Also make sure that the rounds inside the magazine are facing forwards before you fix it into place as well. Number 4. Armor. Next up, we want to give our Void Scions some heavier armor and also some battle damage. The easiest way to bulk up the armor is to use some bigger shoulder pads like those from the Aggressors, Interceptors, and the Terminator kits. However, before you glue them on, let's add some battle damage. To create the appearance of shell impacts, you'll want to start things off by drilling some shallow holes with a 1mm bit into the areas more likely to receive hits but still be functional. The shoulder pads and lower legs are good choices here. You can then widen these holes out with a 2mm bit to create a dip in the armor's surface. However, what we have here is too smooth and looks more like deterioration seen on a Death Guard armor. To rough these up a little, we want to grab some putty like this one from Deluxe Material, take a small amount of this and place it into the hole you just created. Then, using the handle of a thin brush or a sculpting tool, push the putty into the sides of the hole to create a rough donut shape. Give this a few minutes to dry slightly, it does dry pretty quickly, before making slight adjustments to the donut to help it to blend into the uneven patterns into the rest of the armor. We want to create the appearance that armor has around the point of damage has been deformed and raised due to the force of the impact. The result is that much more realistic than battle damage just formed using a knife or a drill. Number 5. Explosives. Whether they're blasting through the hull or just taking a shortcut through to the next floor, explosives are a must for the Void Scions. These components are abundant across human-based factions in 40k, and you should be able to find plenty of grenades, melter bombs, and other explosive-based weaponry. I'm personally using a melter bomb from an older submarine kit, along with some chest-mounted grenades from the Reaver kit, and some regular grenades from the Intercessors kit. You can just place these wherever you feel you want to add them to your model, or mix and match them with the pouches that we applied earlier. So when trying to work out how these guys looked, I imagine them as being extremely utilitarian. If something didn't help them out in combat, then it just wasn't needed. So unless those additional symbols, relics and markings that gave them an edge, then they were dropped in favour of extra ammo pouches. The same went for their armour. They wouldn't have a colour scheme as such, instead their armour would be coated in a protective layer of paint designed to prevent rust or corrosion with no additional colours being added over the top. I initially thought that a red oxide primal colour would work well here, but it would probably make them look too similar to Blood Angels or Flesh Tearers. Instead, I went for a dull orange, a colour that I thought would be reasonable for any practically minded Void Scions. Over the top of this, I added a healthy layer of grime and dirt to represent the weathering of the armour and the kind of damage that it would receive when fighting through enemy ships that are quite coincidentally likely to be in a state of disrepair very shortly after the Void Scions arrive. So what did you think of the Void Scions? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget that if you're watching this video before the 31st of January 2020, there is still time to enter my Homebrew chapter competition. I'll include that competition video in the description below as well. Now before I go on, I just want to say a big thank you to the guys who support me on Patreon. Your continued support in making videos is amazing and I really appreciate your help. If you'd like to help out too, I've included my Patreon page in the description below, where you can donate to me from as little as $1 a month. And for anyone looking to chat about all things wargaming and others who enjoy my channel, I've set up a Discord server which you can find a link to in the description. So the only thing left to say is, thanks for watching and goodbye.